Here we are, back with the conclusion of the round table discussion. 23rd of July.
Remainder of this century, if China continues to rise. And I think that the United States will have to work with countries like Australia, Japan, South Korea, India, the Philippines, and even Russia to contain China. So I see whether Donald Trump stays in office or somebody replaces him, the United States concentrating more and more on East Asia and working more and more closely with countries like Australia to contain China.
Now, Kim, I mean, you heard John there, this offshore balancing thesis. Does that resonate with you? That is less focus, less American focus on Europe, less American focus on the Middle East, and much more focus on East Asia to contain a rising hegemon in China.
It not only resonates, it overjoys. But
but bear in mind, though, Kim, a lot of Australians would be trembling about that because China's our largest trade partner.
I'll put a couple of caveats on that, and that is, I mean, I spent a fair amount of time trying to argue that my American counterparts when I was there that, you know, Asia is the sunny uplands for you. There, everybody loves you, and even in the case of the Chinese wants to get on with you. You go across to Europe and the Middle East, and what you do is stare into the abyss of everybody who wants to spend your political capital, your security, and your capital more generally, and basically they ought to be looking after themselves vastly more than they are. But you're conscious when Obama was making that sort of overt pivot that the Israeli embassy, the Saudi embassy, the European embassies were scrambling like blazes, even though if you look rationally, as John has, at the structure of the globe, you would arrive at the conclusions John arrives at. I'd have a slightly different emphasis. I don't use expressions like containing China because China is not the old Soviet Union, which definitely needed to be contained. China's a big global economic player. Shaping is the expression that I would use. You want to engage China in where the world ought to go, but engage them in an open-eyed fashion, clear-eyed fashion, and with an understanding that sometimes that might have to provoke a substantial, that may represent a substantial disagreement.
Well, John, how does Australia fit into your balancing offshore thesis, especially the notion of containing China, which I think it's fair to say might unnerve Australians of all political stripes because we have this rapidly developing trade and investment relationship with Beijing?
Well, there's no question that virtually every country that the United States has good relations with in East Asia also trades with China, and therefore doesn't want to get involved in a security competition that involves China and the United States, where those countries are on the opposite side from China, because this will anger the Chinese, and countries like Australia worry that this will hurt Australia economically. This makes perfect sense. But the argument I would make that as China gets more and more powerful, you're going to see it throw its military weight around in East Asia more and more. The Japanese are already seeing this in the East China Sea, and there's all sorts of evidence of this in the South China Sea. And the United States and its allies is going to have to work to contain China. And this is going to involve moving more American forces to East Asia, stationing more forces in places like Australia, and working out clever strategies to keep the Chinese from dominating East Asia.
Kim?
Yeah, look, again, I find myself in agreement with John when he talks about the movement of forces and the interplay between the United States and other powers in the region, which also have strong relationships with China. But I don't use, as I just reiterate again, I don't use an expression like containing. I use shaping because it's not an omnipotent power. It's not a power with the breadth of American capacity. And
not yet, though. But John's point is that if its economy continues to rise,
that is entirely in the hands of the United States Congress, Pentagon, and the United States administration. The next generation of American weapons, if they're allowed into the system by congressmen who want to divert defence spending to everything else, basically is a total answer to asymmetrical warfare. There's not going to be a capacity if the United States decides they'll develop the military in that direction, for them to successfully organise a struggle against powers who have the United States on its side. But you don't actually want them to see the world that way. You want them to see the world differently, because you don't want the sort of disruption that will come from a conflict. But you will get that disruption if America is not playing the sort of power role that John describes. We're talking about movements which are essentially geopolitically well set at this time. What we're not really talking about is the role that individual actors will play. Now, I'm curious about what Trump's talking to the Russians about. You know, there are all sorts of issues that he has personally with his finances and his past relationships with Russia, which may see him politically hung. But nevertheless, he has to be talking to Putin about something. Now, I wonder if, for example, the one thing he's focused on is North Korea. Is he actually talking to Putin about the possibility of trying to develop a diplomacy that actually involves North Korea? I don't know. There are no Americans sitting in those meetings apart from Trump and Tillerson, and in one case a translator and others none. But that might be an interesting direction that he's taking. Then what is he doing with trade with China? At the one moment he's got his underlings working out how they can conduct a conflict with China on trade, yet he backs and fills from this with more sensible employees like Lighthizer, while very forward-leaning and nationalists nevertheless know that you can operate in a way that breaks the global economy. So there's a whole raft of these things which are going on, if you like, in superstructure, whereas the base is moving to the rhythms that John is fundamentally
Well, returning to Trump and the Chris Ullman video, writing in The Australian recently, Paul Kelly, he raised the question, is Trump an aberration or a harbinger of a permanently changed America? John.
Well, there's no question that America has changed in fundamental ways. And Kim before was talking about what would have happened if Joe Biden had run against Trump instead of Hillary Clinton. I would note that the person who did run against Hillary Clinton and came very close to beating Hillary Clinton was not Joe Biden. It was Bernie Sanders.
Great point. The 75-year-old socialist from Vermont. Yeah. He spoke the same language as Trump in many respects, didn't he, John?
He did, especially on foreign policy. Yeah. And that just goes to tell you that there's been a big change here. You know, the Paul Kelly article makes the point that there's a huge clash going on in the United States between Trump, who is attacking the liberal international order that the American elites love. So you have this big fight taking place between the foreign policy establishment on one hand and Trump on the other hand. And the question is, who's going to win? But in the meantime, as Kelly points out in this very fine article, it produces an American foreign policy that is really discombobulated and hard to make sense of. And this drives allies in places like East Asia crazy, which is of great consequence if you believe, like I do, that it's important to contain China. If the United States is going to contain China, it needs a president who's thinking strategically and is working closely with the South Koreans, the Japanese, the Australians, the Filipinos, and so forth and so on, to cobble together a smart strategy of containment. But that's not what we have, because Trump is basically a loose cannon. And what he's doing is unnerving our allies in East Asia, which is not a smart way to deal with a rising China, in my opinion.
Look, it's really interesting. You've got to... What most of the countries in Asia are doing now, after the initial shock of Trump, they're now trying to work out how to manage him. You know, the Vietnamese had a sort of set of propositions for him, the Japanese have, we have. They are, whether they're doing it consciously or unconsciously, are treating him as a one-off. And the Australian and the people are interesting in this regard. You have that poll that's replicated both by our organisation, the US Asia Centre, and then the one by Lowy a couple of weeks ago. Both of them showed Trump at almost zero levels of confidence.
That's right.
As far as the public is concerned.
Yes, I should have mentioned that. Yeah.
The belief in the importance of the American alliance was up in both polls. So there's a separation going on in the public mind.
John, Kim, unfortunately, we are out of time. To be continued. Thanks so much for your company this morning.
No worries. It's been a pleasure.
It was my pleasure, Kim and Tom.
That was my first.
Okay. So Trump has been tried in a kangaroo court. And the opinion is only divided as to whether all of America's dramatic fall in global prestige is due to Trump, or whether Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama might have had something to do with it too. Yeah. Interesting matter. Who's more responsible? I mean, America's been on a fairly steady downhill slide since Watergate. I remember my auntie. She was a great lover of America, to the point where she'd married an American who came to Australia during World War II. She was in the Air Force, he was in the American Army, I think. And she went back to America with him and tried to live there, and they couldn't stand it. It was too cold, and there weren't many jobs in America just after World War II. So they came back to Australia, and yeah, she took me to see All the President's Men when it was brand new in the cinema in Australia. And I had pretty much no idea what Watergate was about at the time, and it was all kind of overwhelming at the time. But what I do remember is the amount of emotional distress my aunt was in at the concept of America having been brought so low that their president had to resign or be impeached for indulging in petty criminal activities. And well, it sort of burbled along there for a while, a bit like Donald Trump's visualisation of climate change. But then somebody told Ronald Reagan that it was an infringement of freedom of speech for the Congress to require that all American national broadcasters, radio, TV, that originally started off as a congressional requirement on newspapers before radio was invented, they had to limit their news and editorial content to that which could be proved as true by the best known science of the time. That was considered an infringement of your freedom of speech rights to insist that national media editorial and news was actually true. And guess what? Rupert Mudraker Murdoch decided he could make more money selling bullshit to the Americans now it was legal. So he renounced his Australian citizenship, we exiled him, and he went to America and became a citizen of Uncle Spam. And he set up Fox News, and he spent 35 years pouring bullshit into the ear holes of muddled America. And that's had a lot to do with America's failing prestige globally too. The fact that it was predictable that Trump would get in because nearly half the Americans were as silly as the character that he portrayed on his Fire the Apprentice TV show or whatever the hell it was. I never saw it. I haven't had a television for over 25 years and didn't have much to do with them before that either. So yeah, it was predictable that muddled America, half of them, that's really all you need. Less than half if more of yours turn out than the other fellas, because, well, it's voluntary voting. You don't have to go to the polling place, and you don't have to fill out a ballot paper or you don't have to receive a ballot paper in order to avoid a fine. Like here in Australia, you have to say something when the election's on. You have to vote. It's a requirement, statutory. So yeah, Tronald Dump got elected with 40-something% of the people who voted. He still holds apparently 80% of the Republicans in his thrall. He's got 83% approval rating in the American Republican Party, but he's only got 37% or something, 36% approval rating in the American population as a whole. And he's trying to stack his clique, his junta, with people who are loyal to him rather than with people who are loyal to the Constitution. People who are loyal to the idea of what America is. And he doesn't know what America's about. He doesn't understand its laws. He doesn't understand the doctrine of the separation of powers. He doesn't understand Congress. He doesn't understand the Senate. He doesn't understand that he was not elected the King of America or the Emperor of the world. And he's going to consistently disappoint himself as he comes up to speed on those facts. It's funny and tragic to watch. I still reckon he's the Gaia Principle's revenge on industrialised humans. That's what's going on. He's going to cause the global village to implode with his buffoonery and his ignorance. Anyway, we're on the upload limit again. Warble's on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.